Hello, everyone. We'll be getting started shortly, but welcome back. It's still 2021. It's still January, but I hope everybody's doing good. This is Michelle, Senior Program Manager here at Women Engage. I want you to go ahead, chime in the comments.
Hello,
Let us know where you're
everyone.
tuning
We'll
in
be
from.
getting started shortly.
Ooh, okay. Had some feedback there, but that's okay. And so let's see here. Let's see what we got going on. Getting all of my screen situated. Hello, everyone. It's so great to see you all. All right, I see the viewers coming in. Don't mind the light in my eyes. I know it's a little bright in here. Um, but thank you all for being here with us. It's going to be an exciting time. I'm really excited to dig down to these conversations today. So let's see here. And as folks who know, if you're listening in, we have our collaborative playlist. I'm going to drop that link into the comments. Please feel free to add in your music to that. This is something that started back for our National Voter Registration Day back in September. And this list has continued to grow with contributions from people like you and others, like volunteers and other staff members and team members who have really added on some of the jams that really get them moving and grooving. Um, so so really excited about today's topic. I know we've been gone for a little bit, and that's just so we can rejuvenate, refresh ourselves, because as we mentioned before, the work doesn't stop. So there's a whole host of things that we are, getting ready to roll out, getting ready to experience. And so really excited about that. I believe last time where we left off, though, we were having a conversation around the Georgia legislature, right? I think right before we saw you all last, the legislative session had not just begun just yet. It was going to begin on that Monday. But now we see that we are actually in the full swings of it. And currently, right now, there has been a lot of conversation around what is going on in terms of where money is being allocated towards, what programs are being cut, what things are being funded, all things that directly impact us in our communities. And so I'm really excited about this work today. Also, here at Women Engaged, we are gearing up to do some amazing work around not only just the legislative session, but really digging down deep into our communities and in our networks. So if you haven't already, go ahead, like this, share this video out, and also make sure to sign up on our action hub, which is womenengage.vote, to stay connected. So then that way we can continue to build power together. And so I'm really excited about just having this conversation, though, because I know for myself personally, I get a little bit intimidated when it comes to like money and budgets and stuff like that. And so I'm really appreciative for us to be bringing this episode to you all in partnership with the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, which does a lot of work around doing the research and the necessary engagement to ensure that we are getting the information that we need. So today is going to be a roundtable conversation with two of our very special guests. The first one is Amanda, who is the Director of Strategic Campaigns for the Georgia Budget Policy Institute and formerly has been the State Director for 9 to 5 Georgia and Education Specialist for LifeLink of Georgia. Being a servant to her community is her passion. Her volunteer efforts include holding roles as co-coordinator of the Savannah Black Heritage Festival Committee, member of the Savannah, Georgia chapter of the Links Incorporated, board member of Reform Georgia, graduate of Georgia Win List Leadership Academy, and to date, her greatest accomplishment is being the mother of her son. So I would love for you all to join me in welcoming our special guest, Amanda Hollowell, as well as our next special guest, which you all know and love her, is Malika Redmond, our current co-founder and executive director for Women Engage. And so if you two, I would invite you both to turn off your video so everyone can see your beautiful faces and we can start really getting into it. So yeah, so welcome. Oh my gosh. It's so great to see you. Sorry, I have all of these windows in front of me, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm looking at them here. And so we already have one good comment here in the Facebook chat, and it says, government budgets are moral documents, but they are also absolutely super intimidating. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's something about like when you start looking at these numbers and stuff, and I think too, this kind of like talks a little bit more about how, at least from my perspective, I'm like, there's definitely a distinction about how like I budget personally versus like how the government budgets. So like it's a whole different thought, and so that's why I really wanted to bring in these like two dynamic folks just so we can have a roundtable discussion. I know, especially like in the experiences of women engaged and experiences that Malika holds, is knowing to work around the issues, especially when it comes to safety net programs. And so, thank you both for being here. Super excited. I'm going to go ahead and pass it around just in case you both want to say some words to the audience or just to say hello to everyone. So, I'm going to pass it over to Malika first, and then we'll pass it over to Amanda.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Michelle, and welcome, Amanda. We're both really happy to have you with us today. And, I just wanted to first come on and just say some Happy New Year's greetings to all of you. And, we're actually still in January. It is not over yet. And so, even though this month has already sort of feels already like a lifetime. But here we are with so much promise, even at a challenging, extremely challenging time. And so I'm looking forward to really listening to, Amanda break down how we are to understand, particularly as Georgians, thinking about our state budget, thinking about what does it mean when it comes to the kinds of programs, safety net programs, and other resources that are very important to um, Georgians, but also just for our viewers at large. How do we think about these programs? How do we think about our national budget, our local budgets, our state budgets? So, welcome. Happy to have you and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so glad we all got the glasses and head wrap memo. I was hoping I could fit in, so I read the dress code. um, I think, when I took this job now, a little bit over a year now, literally like 10 days over a year of being at Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, my main goal was how do we have this discussion about the budget and make it accessible to all? Because it is extremely intimidating. It is a lot of line items and there's some subtraction and some division in there. I think at the end of the day, though, like, it's just like how we manage our own household economy, right? And how you look at budgets on a state and local and national level is really important. And like I always think, like, would I spend money on that in my house if that was in my house? And then I kind of like make that bigger as how we talk about the Georgia budget, right? Would I spend money on that? And currently, a lot of decisions we make, no. um, or I ask, why aren't we spending money on that? Why aren't we fully funding education? Why aren't we really talking about what the social safety net is in time of an economic downturn, in time of women being the highest unemployed in the state and in this country, and we're part of the major part of the workforce. So why aren't we talking about where are those couple extra $100 million to make sure everyone's okay? So that's an intro to how do we talk about it and how do we look at it. I'll let you go to your first question before I will go on a rant. So
It's okay. I'm excited. I'm excited for this knowledge. I'm excited for the gems. Okay. Like I'm here for it all. And
yeah,
so I guess like the first question I always want to start with is just like knocking out those terms. So like what exactly is a safety net program or policy? And like why should we really be looking out for them?
yeah. So safety net is a rebrand from what we come up with the 80s and the late 70s and 80s terms of welfare. And so, that is a rebranding, an idea to make sure that everyone can have a more comfortable acceptance of being a part of the social safety net, and for folks to have a more comfortable understanding. Here at GPBI, we actually find all of it steeped in racism. Most of the analysts of the social safety net are going to be your white, educated. They write in terms on the folks who are on the safety net in very derogatory, kind of laced and stereotyped terms of who these people are. These people are people, and at the time, they need help. And our safety net looks different. It has different buckets. So, like cash assistance, or known as TANF, food assistance, or also known as SNAP. We SNAP has come a far way. That's another rebranding. You would know that as food stamps, right? And so now we're at SNAP. And so then we look at, people don't realize Medicaid expansion is actually a social safety net tool, as well as unemployment insurance is a social safety net tool. And so it has these very large brackets. Also on the federal level, earned income tax credit and child tax credits are actually part of the social safety net. And so in Georgia, we don't have an earned income tax credit, but we're fighting for one. We've got bills filed for this session. God help us. And so, overall, there are these services where the government decides to just try to keep you whole, right? When there is no other way to keep you whole. Also childcare vouchers, caps, housing assistance, these are also part of the safety net. And none of these things, if you're in a position in your life, means you're less than. It just means there's an opportunity for someone to help you through a subsidies or through a cash assistance in order to get you off your feet, in order to make you better. And whole again. And so, like, I think, we live in this myth that safety nets are used by people of color, or how that most reports write, minorities, to be lazy, to feed and eat off the government. When actually they're the lesser percentage of people who actually use these services across the country. And in Georgia, it's about even. So
Yes, no, I appreciate you breaking it down like that. No, Malik. Oh, sorry, Malik. Were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking, I wonder if we could, take a little moment and do a history lesson of the ways in which safety net programs, if you will, became used as a racialized weapon. And therefore, and because it's so important to really talk about, not only the ways that race was used, but also the way that sexism. And I appreciate the term misogynoir by my Spelman sister, Moya Bailey, who, coined that term. And, really the idea and thinking about, as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s as a child, and hearing the kinds of ways that welfare was used as a political trope, as a wedge issue, particularly to put a wedge with the sort of respectable middle class, right? And those who were not, and how for those who were in need of assistance in any part of their life, were also labeled, a lot of kinds of terms that and then we get to the welfare to work um, program, the Clinton Welfare to Work program, and this idea that if you can just get these mothers, particularly Black mothers who were single mothers, off of welfare, that this would bring dignity into their lives. And just how far back that kind of thing goes. I wonder if we could spend just a little bit of time in talking about the ways that race and gender really play a role in how we understand these programs, who's valued, who isn't. And that, the government infusing money into the people that live in this country in order to help get through economic downturns and other things is not new.
No.
And it is how we get to a white middle class. So I just be great to, if we could take just a little bit of time to talk through that.
So I'll give us, I think because I like to kind of stay grounded in Georgia. And so I will give us the best example I can give of what misogyny and racism shows up in the social safety net. And it's a policy that we've been fighting for about 2 years now. Well, a year and a half, which is people don't know that our TANF cash assistance has a family cap, which means if you are on cash assistance for your children and you're currently pregnant, you cannot receive cash assistance for that child. And that was their term. It came up, it was a program that was, or a stipulation that was implemented in the 80s, right around the welfare queen trope. And that's how Georgia actualized it. And it came up as a way to discourage, because they thought it was Black women from having more children and staying on the system. And that policy is in place to this day. We have an opportunity. We do have legislation filed, I believe, for this session to get it removed. It's also a simple regulatory advocacy where someone could have a heart in the agency and look at how we're making this and see if they can make recommendations. But that right there is like the quintessential piece of what racism and misogyny looks like in a social safety net program. And it was all based off this idea that, Black women are living off the system and we don't work. And we're having all these children. And I think another thing that we have to address is, as like from the Clintons administration, from Reagan's administration, started with the welfare queen trope, which found out it wasn't real. It was a story of one woman in particular who was able to game the system, but they made it sound universal and pervasive as a way to not raise services or raise dollars for these services. Then moving into the Clinton administration, as to be bipartisan, they moved into this welfare to work program to assuage the other side, but they were still being detrimental because we ran into what we now call the economic cliff. So as we were sending these people off these services to these low-paying, unlivable wage jobs, they kept saying, well, why do they come back? They're coming back because we're sending them to an environment and a community and a workforce that is not developed in order to make them whole, to make them work, and to be able to have them live, take care of themselves, and everything, feed their family, their health care. None of that was equated to how the government was coming in and stepping up for these people. And so the question is not, do we just keep making them take multiple jobs so they're in this underemployment field where they can't get health insurance, but they have to have multiple part-time gigs or part-time jobs in order to make that money to sustain themselves. The challenge is that, like, what are we saying about our workforce? What are we saying that if we literally are pushing folks into an economic cliff because we are tired of the idea that we think we're taking care of them?
Well, and even like what you're saying, the lower wage jobs, for so many who perhaps were in transition and who had worked before and were actually making more before the welfare to work program because they were in transition, having to get on assistance, and then ending up having to take, to your point, lower wage jobs than that they may have had before needing to get on assistance. And so again, to that point.
Yeah. I mean, I just like, we have to like, I think I love the term that people use, which is like, we have to look at the whole human. When we talk about the social safety net, we have to look at the whole, what is a whole care program for a person, right? And also being very real with ourselves about what is the environmental scan and what we're sending people back to, right? We're sending them back into an environment that, again, the wages aren't equitable, the housing access is not equitable, health access is not equitable, but we're saying pick up by your bootstraps, please get off this program to make us look good because we don't want to fund it anymore and survive, fingers crossed. That's insane. That's not how you do this, right? That's
No, I definitely agree with that. Like, cause I'm even thinking too, like, what was it, like the largest um expansion of like safety net programs I think happened shortly around the Great Depression, right? With I think like FDR. And I think
yes.
to the point Malika raised earlier around like the history of it, like that's kind of where we see a lot of various harmful things due to institutionalized racism and sexism really play out because there were already the existing stereotypes of like black folks in particular being very lazy, not like we don't want to work, we don't want to do this, things of quality. And so when we have these safety net programs that first really bolstered out of that moment, it was at first really great because they still help white people, but then they started attaching us to these tropes, and they continue to change over time and continue to morph, but still are very much embedded or like deeply rooted in that misogyny, that sexism, the racism of it all, in the ways in which we really access these programs. When statistically speaking, like white folks are still some of the like larger populations that still utilize these services, at least to my knowledge. Like so, okay,
Nationally, yes.
thank you. I was like, thank you for that validation because I was
Yeah,
like,
demographically it changes different geographically, but nationally, yes.
yes, and so I think like, and then too, I think about as well how ingrained it is in our society and this idea. Like I love like the phrase "pull yourself up by your bootstraps," right? Which is like what for one physically impossible. Have you ever tried pulling yourself up by both your feet? I'm just saying you need somebody to be there to support you, which is what safety net programs are about. Like I always like to just because so I think about that too and how like a lot of the lore of the United States is all about like this idea that it's very individualistic, that we don't operate in community, but also too this idea that we really don't reckon with the institutional ways in which racism and sexism show up in every strain of it and how much that greatly impacts um, our access to net programs, right? And then
Yes.
also too, like how we're able to, uh, whether or not graduate from those programs, or to your point, like when you said like bringing us back to like conditions where we're having lower wages, and so it's like, oh my goodness, right? So no, this is
Cyclical.
great. I love these.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah,
what?
like we can keep people in poverty. I think also like um so at the time of the social safety net creation, it made sense because it was like for white people during the Great Depression, right? And then as demographics change, as the program still goes on and no one revisits, we see who are the users. I'm saying all this to say like we are in an economic downturn. We're in unprecedented times of unemployment, right? Yeah, another relief package on the federal level. They've done some great movements where they've increased FMAP, which is like the amount of money we're getting for SNAP and food, because food insecurity is real. Um, when people lose their jobs, food is expensive. It is very expensive, and that is the first thing that people tend to tighten up on in their budget, right? Also, people, because we're forced to stay home, more people are home, more families are home together, right? You shouldn't be out in restaurants maskless right now, whooping it up. You're going to be home cooking some meals, and there's going to be a different change in your finances. Um, I say it is unbelievably disappointing to watch our current state budget move on as if nothing has changed in Georgia. When we were listening to the appropriations meetings this week, it was to hear like Health and Human Services say they didn't need any more money. The Department of Labor not ask for more money when we know there's people who have not gotten their unemployment insurance collections payments for months now, months. Um, and so I don't know where the disconnect is. If our federal government sees a need and they're reading the data, they're especially reading disaggregated data, right? So they know where the real pain points are, then why are we not doing that on the state level? We currently have a reserve of about $2 billion. We could literally use 1.2 billion of that, fully fund education, get our safety net programs up and going, get some help with the Department of Labor, expand that access. But yet here we are touting that we have a savings when, if anything, if you have the ability to use your savings to help your people, why not?
And isn't it the case? Yeah, isn't it the case that the sort of disposition of the state has been to pride itself on getting people off these programs, and so therefore, what we find in Georgia is not only are people, not getting, for example, like you said, the unemployment insurance when they need it, when they're eligible, um, the Medicaid when for pregnant people long enough postpartum to really make a difference and make sure that you're healthy and well. That this sort of disposition to want to get people off the programs, so that it's been kind of the disposition, like the what Georgia sort of prides itself on. um, and I'm just wondering, like, how does the state sort of make sense of that kind of positioning when, again, we have, lots and lots of people who are uninsured who would otherwise be eligible if the Medicaid program was expanded, who, again, who would be eligible and who are eligible for things like unemployment insurance, but are just not getting it. How does the state reconcile that? Is there some way that they're getting incentivized? How does that make sense? Or is it just, again, we're back to fundamentally racism and sexism, and just it doesn't make financial sense? I'm just wondering.
So it's an ideology. Honestly, it's a theory. Austerity is the word that they use. It's a theory or a move or an idea of how do you manage budgets with austerity, which is basically strict. It's being cheap, right? Like that's the only common layman's word I can say. It's being cheap. It's being strict on your spending, strict on policies with that fiscal notes in order to say that you have a rainy day fund or savings for the rainy day. And that's how they've always moved. So, and it forms itself in different ways. So last year when we were really just like in the thick of it, and then in the middle of session, we saw they decided, instead of figuring out how to fund everyone, right, which is like revenue raising, like tobacco tax, or looking at our double deductions, or looking at the tax breaks that we give corporations, right? They were like, got an idea, let's cut the budget. So, and the number that was thrown out in the original was 14%. 14% cutting our budget. And y'all, just so you know, like it's been studied, Georgia operates on a $24.1 billion budget. If we were to actually fully fund and make sure we're servicing all 10.8 million Georgians, our budget would be $29 billion. So we already start off short. we already are starting off short. And then we were making it the pull tighter and harder. And like, leadership can say things like there will be no furloughs, but when you hand someone a department head or a community center, like a health center, and say, I need you to cut 10%, the first thing they're going to do is what? Furlough or downsize or cut down time, because that human equity, those salaries probably take up the majority of folks' budgets. And we weren't ready to go virtual as a state department, right? Like we weren't ready to pivot when it was time to pivot. We don't even have broadband for the whole state. So, a study just recently showed it would cost $2.9 billion to fully get all of Georgia with full broadband. I think in the state budget that's going through the House right now, they've approved $20 million. Who's that helping, guys? It's a couple polls. Like, so again, but the idea of austerity, the idea of being cheap and extreme economically is how this ideology happens. While others look at it as a way, this is when the government step in, right? This is when, because we can cash that check, we can go into a deficit because we do have bailouts and safety net of our own and security procedures. So there's ways that, you know, your government can actually fully fund and do the things it needs to do for everyone. But if you choose to go that way or that way, it's again on your leadership. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud because it really sounds depressing when I say it out.
It's okay. We just talking facts today. I mean, and sometimes the best way to like get through it is that you got to acknowledge what's there so we can create the change that we need. So you all good. But I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna position a couple questions that we got from our folks who are viewing it on Facebook. So thank y'all. We see y'all in the comments. And so I'm just gonna throw both of them out there. And so just so you know, you can think about it. The first one is: will Georgia ever consider no state taxes similar to our neighboring states like Florida or Tennessee? And then the last one is curious about how integrated eligibility systems are actually supporting whole person care with social safety net programs. And so, not sure who I would have passed. Amanda, how you feeling there?
The first one, Georgia getting rid of their state taxes, absolutely not. Like, no. And I gotta understand because like Florida has taxes, y'all. They don't have personal income taxes, but there are state taxes for Florida. So that question is kind of dubious in its nature. You know, like some states move into flat taxes instead of like incremental increases. But right now, the way Georgia is funded, we fund a lot of our how our government works through our tax system, especially on our school districts on the local level, and especially on the county with our county services that are provided there. So it would be extremely hard. Also, we don't have the state income or the level of like housing income assessments to really just go cold turkey and say like, no, this is not how we're going to fund Georgia. But we do get a lot of federal subsidies, so we could use that better. We have a lottery, 780 million in stock, but that hasn't been touched. That could go to Hope. We could increase the dollars for Hope. We can make Hope need based instead of merit based, because right now it's merit based, Hope and Zell, and that actually ends up going to incomes and households that make over $120,000 a year instead of in 3.3 GPAs. I think they're going to lower it. But if we actually made it need based, we would actually have more people using Hope and Zell scholarships. I think, I mean, I could go on and on and on. It's just our stuff is so tangled into our taxes that we would have to do literally an overhaul. So, and then on the second question, I'm a little curious. It feels like it's a lot of big words. Integrated eligibility systems. What are those? Is he talking about the portal, like Gateway?
No, we'll give them a second to respond. I wasn't sure. So yeah, like I appreciate that though, because I was like, maybe Amanda knows. So it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, because
We'll
we
get some
have
clarity.
there's a digital way. That's another thing that's very frustrating about how we use our safety net in Georgia. But most safety nets do this. Our software and our systems, it's a platform. Most people have to go if you don't have Wi-Fi at your house or a laptop. Let's start there. You can't really. It's not really responsive, so you can't file on your phone. You got to go find a desktop. You got to go or find some assistance, some you know, like community centers, some United Ways, some like churches even will help people file and apply for safety net programs that they apply for, or a caseworker. Then they get transferred to DFACS, and DFACS has they have software, hardware there for folks to use, or you can, you know, someone will walk you through that. And so even then, just to get the services is a challenge. So
No, I appreciate it. I got the clarification. They were asking about the digital sync of eligibility determination, but I think you touched on that there.
yeah, I mean, there is no, it helps, but you got to get there first, right? Like, and it doesn't, so when we talk about this, it doesn't actually, just because you're able to access and apply faster and digitally sync, it doesn't mean the operation of the programming works. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about caseworkers who are overwhelmed. We're talking about underfunding where cash assistance has a chance to actually increase, right? So we're getting more cash in hand. I mean, we have some reserve dollars. Last year, they proposed to use the reserve dollars in the middle of a pandemic uh, to fill their budget cuts that they were told to cut the budget with. When reality, the cash program is supposed to go to who? The people. So, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, no, like you can digitally sync, you can have as many portals as you want. If we're on the back end, not actually doing it at its best, then there's always going to be problems. As long as it's underfunded, there's always problems, right?
Right. So I guess like that brings me to like, and somebody else lifted this up, and it's something else that I'm big curious about too, in terms of like when we're talking to the community or we're talking to our loved ones and others about the budget, and oftentimes how it's like, well, I mean, if I didn't have the money for it, I just wouldn't spend about it. Like these are luxury items. How do we begin to divorce these ideas that we have about like individual money consumption versus holding our government accountable to their money consumption? Do you see what I'm saying, I guess? So like,
Yeah. Do you pay taxes on anything and it
mhm.
ends up in the state budget? That's your money. Period. You have every right to speak up and say how the government spends your money. Like we fund the government. So like that's how I look at it. So again, remember when I was making the analogy of would I spend that in my home? Would I underfund myself from paying my bills every month? If I know my house costs this much money to operate, all my housing bills, but I keep shorting myself and thinking, fingers crossed. Like, no, that's not going to work. Something's going to lose, right? So, yeah, like, no, you have every right to speak up. I think one of the best programs I saw was out of North Carolina with North Carolina Black Alliance. Um, they did your democracy, your dollars. This democracy costs money. Yeah. We can move bills. I think the best example I can give is a Medicaid expansion bill. We fought hard. Everyone was on that fight. I remember it was a coalition, and they turned around. They said 6 months, right? And now we have to fight again to get 12 months, which is the national average. That hiccup came from the fiscal note and them saying, we're willing to put in this much money for motherhood mortality, but let me make a resolution about Black mothers and Black babies. Let me do a commission about Black women, but let me short you on the funding. Let me not get you to the national average. Because again, austerity.
Oh my gosh, you ain't the number of word because it sometimes does get very tiring when you see like these very performative like resolutions, and they're just like, oh yeah, like we care about this, but then also to not really putting their money where their mouth is and really fully funding these programs. And so I guess my question would be then like, what? How do we like then so we always talk to our folks about cultivating relationships with their electeds, right? But in those conversations, particularly around budget, what are some best practices that you would tell community in terms of like advocating with their legislators, especially going into like the state sessions now? So it's like, okay, they're in there, they're talking. What can we start saying to them now about these things to make sure that they're being held accountable to the things that we need?
I mean, we do education on the budget with lawmakers, right? But I will give you the cycle. It is a year-round advocacy to argue for the budget. And because we operate not on a traditional fiscal year, right? We operate on a fiscal year where right now the budget that we're fighting for is the amended last 6 months of 2021 to the future of 2022. So the budget goes from July to June, right? So around I would say June, around August and September, the state leadership will start saying, thinking about maybe went through our Office of Budget and Management, OBM, and they think we should have a 5% cut based off the revenues that we've collected in June, right? Like based off the year-long revenues, we think it's going to take this much money to make sure we fully fund and operate Georgia. And so these department heads are going to go back and be like, 5%. All right, where is 5%? What does that look like? and they kind of go at it alone. I will be honest with you. And so this is where, if you have a state representative, you start writing letters and say, "Hey, have you checked in on the budget? Like my hospital closed. What happened? like, I saw caseworkers are not this or not that, right? Like, you start bringing up the issues. I think one thing we're good at in the South is we can bring up an issue, but we got to also be great at connecting it to the policy or to the budget or to the line item why that issue is happening, right? That's why I love the folks at Movement for Black Lives, and I like the defund the police conversation, because it brought it to policy and it brought it to money. And we can all have that same conversation around the safety net, around education, around higher ed. Like, what you doing? Like, why is this happening right now? Right. And so we're in the summer, so they'll start giving the recommendations. They'll send them in the September. And then in January, everyone kind of like consolidates and thinks about it. And then the governor will submit what he thinks is going to take of his research or his theory of change, I would say, what it takes to operate Georgia. And then he brings that to a session. And so it's a constitutional thing that we have to balance our budget every year. That's the one thing they have to do. So it gets submitted to the House. It'll get put into appropriations, either Ways and Means, or each committee actually meets and talks about their budget. You'll hear testimonies from those department heads, from health, from behavioral health, from all everywhere, criminal justice or public safety. And then they come back and make their recommendations. We just voted on our budget for the amended version of 2021, so the last 6 months. We at GBPI firmly believe that they could have took some of those reserves, because we're cash good right now, and actually refund and funded back all those 10% cuts that we did. So these people can move forward in a better way. You see the budget deficits in how the vaccine rollout has happened in each county. You see it in, you can see it just in general in health. You see it in education, what schools are struggling to really go hybrid, who actually had the materials, who had the teachers to support, and had nurses and counselors to support this call. So then they'll make their recommendations. They just voted on it. It was called House Bill 80. Last year we had a majority of folks vote no. This year we didn't get the majority, but everyone was like, well, we have these federal dollars, this will kind of fill those holes. Well, the federal dollars is a one-time payment from Mr. Biden, Mr. President Biden. He is not going to keep funding Georgia. So if we keep cutting our budget in hopes for a check from the federal government, that's not how we operate. That's just not how you can operate. And so now where it is, it's going to be sent over to the Senate, and the Senate's going to vote on it, but they're also going to send it through their committees. And we are going to keep arguing and lifting the voice. They have this amazing opportunity to restore these cuts, to make these departments whole again, and use a little bit of that rainy day fund to make sure everyone's great. So like on Wednesday of next week, we are doing a digital advocacy day. It will be hybrid. We're partnering with some great organizations. I will invite y'all all. Well, we are we're adding the folks at the Ways and Means, the governor. We know who our targets are, to just ask them to consider it, right? And our Senate leadership too as well, to ask them to consider to restore these cuts. Ask them to consider to give a little bit more money. And so that will be our day of digital advocacy, restore the budget, the Georgia budget, people's budget on Wednesday. And then they'll take a break, we believe, and then they'll submit 2022's budget. And 2022's budget is like really, really contingent on if we get a bill passed from the federal government. Though it doesn't have to be, y'all. Like, we have the money. We don't have to wait till March for a second COVID check. We could literally just help Georgia ourselves. So that's where we are.
No, I appreciate that. And you definitely touched on a bit where I could ask, like, where are some of the concerns and the areas there, but I think you covered that part. I guess, like, what comes up for me in terms of it is that, like, it seems as if, though, at least because, like, I know we last year had a series of budget cuts, and now it's like the advocacy is about them restoring those cuts that we had. I guess now it's like, what got me was that you talked a bit about the federal, like waiting for the passage of a federal bill. Um, how often does the federal government impact state budget stuff? Like, is that like I know you mentioned now, like we don't really need to wait for that, but has there ever been a time where it does rely on something from like the federal government or the federal budget before we move on something?
I mean, the Great Recession, the Great Depression, economic downturn, like catastrophe, right? Like this is not usual. Do we get, do you, are there federal dollars funded into programs like your Medex expansion or Medicaid expansion? We did not expand Medicaid in Georgia. There's a couple $100 million federal dollars that's sitting there waiting for us. As soon as we decide that we should expand Medicaid and cover 500,000 Georgians, right? And actually increase our providers here in Georgia serving people. So it's never been this way unless there's an economic downturn where the federal government is like, how do we save? How do we help state and local governments in this moment?
Okay, no, I appreciate that. We got a couple questions coming from the chat. The first one was asking about just your all thoughts about participatory budgeting. So, as they understand it, it's initiatives where certain portions of city, state, or municipal budgets are dedicated towards funding things that neighborhoods and community members make decisions on. Do you have any insight or position on that?
Yeah, I mean, as an individual, I love it. I think it should be the future of how we govern, right? I think though, when you look at tax incentives and tax breaks, and who, I don't know. I'm not going to be the boogeyman and be like who's in whose pocket, but just like where the morals and the ground lie of how people want to build their community on the local level. That's where you run into a lot of those challenges. I think aldermen, county commissioners, they can push for that on the local level and say, I want to do a more participatory budget. They can ask for that. That inclusion, it doesn't have to be as formal. It could be just an open process on here's our budgeting process. These are the times that you could, say that you need more or need less or why. But I firmly believe in it. And technically speaking, the work we do at Georgia Budget and Policy Institute around the tax and budget and our disciplines of work, we release reports and analysts and analysis and research products on everything about the budget. And we submit those to our state representatives and our state leadership in order for them to hear us out. So, we're trying to participate and influence as well. And so I'm a firm believer in it.
I'm wondering if we can get some of this information from GBPI to put on our website and some maybe a link or so in the chat, because I do also see that people are wanting, they're loving this conversation and would love to get some foundational, just kind of a review. And if there's some ways that, that we can just kind of add some things, some links, that would be so that folks can can participate. And it feels to me too that having a part two with Miss Amanda seems like a need to do that, because this is such an important subject matter. And and I know a lot of it's on all of our minds. Obviously, we are, nothing like a national crisis with a pandemic, and so many other things that are going on with domestic terrorism and racial violence, and so many things that are happening right now. We are having to all think about, how can we spend the money that we have when we're not sure, what the government is going to do and when they're going to act. And that this becomes really important. And I think the other thing that comes up for me when I think about this moment, both on like a national level, but then also on a local level, that representation matters. Who our public leaders are matter, and that as individuals, we can and we do get an opportunity to make those decisions, and we do that here in Georgia. And for Women Engaged, it's part of why we make sure that our voter engagement is sort of an essential piece of our programming throughout the year for people here, so that we're connecting the dots between, your vote, what that means with regards to, who the kinds of people we want as public leaders to respond to the kinds of questions and issues that are primary in your life. And that's every year there's an opportunity to do that, not just on, those national election years, but every year there's an opportunity to participate on our local, our statewide, our county levels, on these kinds of things. And we want to make it easier for more folks to feel like they can participate, because everyone's busy. So it can feel very complicated. It can feel very difficult. But we all can get a chance to do at least a piece of that advocacy and activism with our vote. And so, I just wanted to add that piece, and I'm just thinking about that as you're speaking. And I'm also just curious about, ways that, especially because now many of us are home, and, we are getting more information about what's happening politically, just how we can stay in touch and stay involved with what you all are doing, and what Women Engaged is doing, so that, like, I can feel like I'm participating, I'm, being able to act in a way to make some real changes.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Like, I also love like y'all model of how you meet people where they are, how you're engaging specifically women, Black women. And I'm always just really interested in, like, when people do voter engagement, how are they moving past the vote? And I'm a transplant here from Georgia. I've been here 12 years, but I have family from California, right? And it was interesting because they were just like, "Oh, Georgia's golden. Da, 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 da. Y'all flipped and da, da, and I was like, "Oh no, we're a mess at the state. So we got to take all these we got to take all these registered voters and keep them going." And I think engaging in things like the budget process or legislation is how you keep that voter that you engage just to register to vote in this democracy, right, in this process. um and I appreciate that y'all continue to have the conversations, because it's important for people to understand the whole of it all and what they're participating in a whole, right? Also, like, I love that people are making policy and budget advocacy easy, right? Like, I love the Elizabeth Warrens who are like nerding it up, but breaking it down to a point where just the common person is like, "Oh, that's what's up. Like, you know what? Tax the rich. Got it." Like, today, the superintendent of Clayton County blew my mind. He was like, "You know what we need? An equity tax." And I was like, "Equity tax? What is that? I want it. We need it."
He was on point. I watched him today. He was on point, but go
He was
ahead.
good,
He was
wasn't
on
he?
point. He was on fire. Go
He
ahead.
was bringing it. And he talked about like how we're funding education. And when he went immediately into an equity tax. I was like, "Oh no, they're gonna call us all socialists, but it's okay." Like, because but he was saying we are not doing this right. Right. And why are we not talking about every way possible? So, like, even when we talk about budget cuts, we talk about solutions. So in Georgia, instead of waiting on a check from the federal government, we actually have an opportunity to raise revenue. We have the lowest tobacco tax in the country, which is insane. In this day and age where we all know smoking is bad, uh, it actually leads to more medical bills. We give away about, like, I don't want to pick on them, but it's real money. In our film tax credit, we give away about $500 million a year. We only keep 80 million of that in Georgia. We could cap that at 100, keep that money for ourselves, and fund safety net, right? Like, fund extra health services. We give away this crazy double deduction for people who make more than $270,000 a year. So they get to credit it on their federal and on their state. But we can't do an earned income tax credit for middle to low income people. That's insane. So we give all this money away, but then we turn around and ask for those folks who are already in a tight position for more. for more, work more, pay more taxes. You know what I mean? Like, here's less options for you to find healthcare for your family. Here's less options for you to find for you to find a good education, because we decided to unfund or divest from your public school in your community. I think one of the most egregious things that is happening right now on HB 60, it's an education voucher bill. It is specifically targeting people for around like, it's specifically targeting schools who did not go back face to face. And so if your child goes to one of those schools, you can use a voucher and take them out of public school and go to private school. Who's that hurting? Who's that hurting? Why would you take money from public education in this moment? Why should this bill even exist in this moment, right? Most of the schools we found out in our research are heavily Black schools that did not go back to face. And so, and they're like Metro Atlanta inner city. So why does this bill even need to exist right now? It doesn't. But here we are making laws that don't reflect our people, right? And that's where you got to hold the person you voted for accountable.
Oh, you was dropping some gems right there. I had to start taking notes. I was like, let me go click clack. Because I definitely agree with Malika. Like, we definitely need a part two, especially like when we start looking at these different policies and stuff. Because I think, and you raised this up earlier about how, when we start talking about the issues, that we need to start connecting them to policies, because these policies also have fiscal notes on it. And so on the front end, it sounds nice, but on the back end, it's like, how are we really like getting this funding there? And that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of like not only the money that's fiscally tied to it, but also how the fiscal ramifications of it. So, like, to your point with this school thing, like, so we're going to pull students out of public school, give them a voucher for private school, and that's going to do what for that school again? Like, it's just like, right? Oh my, yes. Everyone is in the comments like, yes, part two, yes. Like, we need to have this.
And the part two could be like, some people say, man, I sound like a broken record because we haven't changed. That's why we keep doing these incremental changes, right? And so until we get folks who represent more of these needs, who represent more of Georgia, we're going to have to keep having the same conversation. And, right. and that's what I can't stress enough, right? Which is like, representation matters, but representation, like good representation matters. People who are educated and want to really fight for people. I fangirl Cori Bush because she was so out of control. Like I was like, man, this is wild, but I love it. Like, because she came in speaking in a platform and a policy agenda that directly reflected what her constituents wanted her to say. She is taking some hits for it. She might not get the vote she needs, but it's okay, because as long as you're building that public will and you're showing up with 2,000 signatures or 1,000 signatures, or you got people writing letters to the governor and to the president, whoever it is, right? As long as you have the will behind you, they can't stop you, because that will means those people are going to vote you back in, because you're still talking about what they want, and you still got to keep fighting for what they want.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's great. I know we're almost at time. I'm going to answer this last question we got from the comments because it's right up our alley, about if there are other ways that we can think of to improve voter engagement in local and state elections, because a lot of eyes were on the federal. And I will tell you right now, for everybody who's tuning in, you're already taking the first step by joining us today. I would highly encourage you all to sign up on our website to stay engaged, because there are a host of other folks in our coalition who do this work across the state, who do a year-round engagement with our folks, really talking about the issues, having more conversations and more opportunities for action. So we would really love for you to join in on that. But before we close it out, I mentioned this to you while we were offline, Amanda, but we usually try to end this with music. So I would love to get, what is your jam for the day when it comes to jamming out on this budget advocacy?
So I met this artist while I was watching Lovecraft Country, because I'm kind of like a sci-fi nerd, and the song is called "Money" by by Lee Keeley. Yeah, and so like when it's budget time, I listen to it when just talking about it. I also listen to "Show Me Where the Money Is."
Oh my gosh, I remember when you
viral, "Where the Money Resides" are things that I just like to play.
Is this the song? I think this is the song. I'm gonna
Yeah.
text you. I'm trying to make sure I spelled their name correctly because I know it.
Leikeli.
Yes. Okay.
Chillin', laying in the cut though.
Hey. So like just to say, I too am a sci-fi nerd. I watched Lovecraft Country recently. Whew. But yes, and I heard that song and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So, so you heard where it is, y'all. Like we trying to get where what the money resides and make sure that it's residing with the programs that impact us the most. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Malika. Shout out to Fight for the Future for helping us with all the technical stuff with the awesome graphics that you all have been seeing today. And so we're back at it, you guys. We're going to continue scheduling out more content, having more great discussion, and definitely having a part two. Again, though, if you haven't already, make sure to sign up on our website, www.womenengage.vote, to stay connected, stay engaged with the awesome things that we have going on. And so I'm going to pass it around to my folks here on the call just to say some last parting words as we jam out to this song here.
Well, peace, y'all. Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been awesome. And, rest in peace, our queen, Cicely Tyson.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for lifting that up, Malika. And then Amanda, if you want to say anything before we close it
Thank
out.
thank you for having me. I appreciate y'all. I fangirl y'all, so that's how this goes. But it's your democracy, it's your dollar. So get active. But thank y'all.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Get after it. So thank you all again. Hope you all tune in the next time. Make sure to stay connected with our Facebook page for the next update. And we hope you all have a great weekend. And until next time, you all. Bye.